Welcome back to Protecting Legal Rights of Artists and Designers. There are also materials that I have posted on GoStudio, including the whiteboard video that I have on contract law and how to get into and out of a contract that talks about the contract process. And there's a piece that I have on there for legal eagles and contracts with the pandemic. And I have an assignment on there for Graphic Artists Guild. They're from the pricing guideline, their book, and it's the chapter on contracts. There's an assignment that goes along with that. All right, this presentation, these PowerPoint slides are part of the in-class presentation that I normally do with students, which we can't do because of the shelter-in-place orders that we have right now. So I'll try and make this work as best as I can. I have posted to GoStudio the slide decks in PDF format for you, so you should be able to download the slides and use that to follow along with the video. All right, let's get started. Talking about contract law, it's not what most people think that it is. Of all the different areas of law that we could talk about, contract law is the best for businesses and entrepreneurs. You have control with contract law, meaning you could set up the rules of a business relationship with a contract and set the expectations of the people who are part of that business relationship. Contracts create opportunities to build trust, to set proper expectations and avoid misunderstandings, and control the consequences and the outcomes. Use contracts to your advantage so that you know ahead of time what to do, and you have the ability to respond rather than just react. Relationships, expectations, process, and consequences. That's the mantra that I keep coming back to. We enter into contracts all the time. Contracts create a relationship between parties. Does a contract have to be in writing? No. Should a contract be in writing? Well, I'll give a qualified yes. A contract could be in writing, or it can be a spoken or an oral agreement. Sometimes we call that a handshake agreement. Again, remember the mantra with this. Relationships, expectations, process, and consequences. Contracts help define the relationships and the expectations. They follow a certain process and they work towards a certain outcome. What is a contract? Okay, a good contract is like a roadmap. Now, I know that I'm dating myself when I say this because everybody uses GPS on their phone or in their car, but this metaphor still holds true. A good contract is a planning tool, just like a map is. You can plan your journey, what you want to do and accomplish, what the outcome or the destination is. If there are problems and things take an unexpected turn, you can have other instructions and detours worked into that plan so that you can still meet your expected goal. Again, what is a contract? All right, here's a legal definition. A promise or a set of promises for a breach of which the law gives a remedy, or the performance of which the law in some way recognizes as a duty. Great legalese. All right, in this legalese, there are some important concepts that I want you to focus on. Promises. Promises is part of what creates the relationship. Duty. Yes, I know I said duty. Duty means enforceable. So duty is what makes the contract enforceable. There's also this concept of mutual agreement or mutual assent. It's voluntarily agreeing to the relationship. With that, there's offer and acceptance. That's creating the relationship. There's terms and conditions. That's the details. And there's legal capacity. That's the ability to understand and enter into the contract. All of these are part of mutual agreement or mutual assent. Then there's also the concept of consideration. Consideration is this concept where it's the exchange of something of value for something of value. Parties have to have skin in the game and are giving something to get something. Take a look at the video and the materials that I posted on the contract process. That's the whiteboard video. There's a whole process of getting into and out of a contractual relationship. all sorts of steps and details that are part of that process, even if they're never put into writing. So this chart is from the picture. This chart is from Picture, and I used to use it in class to teach the process to students. Lots of details, lots of things to think about and learn if you want to be a lawyer. So these charts show that contract analysis is this big formal process by which attorneys analyze the contract process. But essentially, it answers two basic questions. Does an agreement exist? Does the contract exist? And if an agreement exists, is it enforceable? Now, normally at this point in the presentation, I do this big reveal in the classroom, and the projector screen rises up to show this giant wall-sized whiteboard with this drawing that covers the entire wall. And I have the students take out pen and paper, or pencil or crayon, and they actually will follow along and draw their own rendition of this. This picture that I have is actually a photo of the contract analysis from last year on the whiteboard. So you've also seen this in that whiteboard video that I posted that you're supposed to take a look at. And yeah, the reason why I show all of this, and I do the simplified version, is so you know the process of getting into and out of a contract. Again, if you haven't watched that video yet, go find the link on GoStudio and watch it now. Download the slides for that. It's going to help you understand the rest of the materials. Then come back here and pick up where we are now. Basic concepts going back to that long legalese definition of what a contract is: enforceable, intent to contract, promises, and terms. Let's walk through these. Enforceable. So there's law backing up the agreement, and there's proof that the parties entered into it voluntarily without any excuses or defenses. Intent to contract. The parties to the contract want to enter into a business relationship intending to get something from the other party. Promises. The parties have made statements that create duties or obligations to perform. Sometimes it's unilateral. One person makes a promise to do something if the other person performs a certain task. I promise to pay you if you paint my house. The other person acts on the promise and paints the house. The person making the promise is now obligated to follow through and pay. One promise. Sometimes that's bilateral. Both parties make promises to do something if the other person promises to do something. I promise to pay you if you promise to paint my house. I promise to paint your house if you promise to pay me. Two promises. And terms. There have to be enough basic details to show that the people, the parties, were going to enter into a relationship. Things like price, time of performance, place or location, and quantity or amount. So, again, enforceable, intent to contract, promises, and terms. So as an example, you have an artist that makes a painting. And there's a buyer that sees it and makes an offer. I want to buy your painting for money. Let's say $500. The artist likes the offer and accepts. Okay, so you've got offer and you've got acceptance. You can show that there's an agreement between the two. There's an implied promise to pay and an implied promise to sell the ownership of the painting. There's intent to contract. Both sides want something. And there are terms. One painting for $500 right now. That brings us to consideration. The exchange. Consideration is that magical legal term. It doesn't mean be considerate in dealing with others. It doesn't mean Consider the other party's offer. I talked about this concept in the whiteboard video, so this should seem familiar. Consideration is the exchange of something of value for something of value. When I tell students about this exchange, they think that it's the exchange of products and goods and services for money. That's part of it. Those tangible things are part of the exchange, but it's also the promises that are made, those intangible things of value that are exchanged. That's part of the consideration also. Something else to think about. Value doesn't have a set standard. The parties have to place whatever value they want on the items and services. They have the freedom to set that value. So if one of the parties wants to pay $5,000 for a Beanie Baby, or a Pokemon, or a comic book, or a painting, a court isn't going to substitute its value. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Collect what you want, you're free to do so. Unless there's a mistake, so the parties couldn't have the proper intent to enter into a contract, or unless there's a misrepresentation stating that the value is more than what it should be, intentionally or unintentionally, or unless there's a misdeed, tricking the other party, or providing something less than promised. Now, consideration is an exchange of something of value for something of value. That isn't always the case, though. Some relationships, some transactions can't be enforced because there's no consideration. Such as a gift. There's no exchange with a gift. No expectation of reciprocity. The giver of the gift, the donor, isn't expecting anything in return, and there's no obligation to give something. That also means that if the person says they're going to give something and they never follow through, the disappointed person can't try to enforce because there's no exchange. There's no consideration. Then there's a joke. There's no intent to exchange something of value, so there's no consideration. A reasonable person would know that it was a joke. Past consideration. You can't give something of value now for something that previously was given or performed. I'm going to pay you a bonus because you did your job so well. In theory, that's not enforceable. I'm going to give you more money because you built my house last year. That's not enforceable. The work was completed and paid for. Can't enforce that promise. It's almost the same as a gift. Along the same lines, it can't be performance of an existing duty that somebody already has for something. That's a double dip in the best case, or extortion in the worst case. The contractor that says he wants more money for doing the construction work that he already agreed to do under contract. I'm not going to finish the work unless you pay me more, and nothing else in the job has changed. And connected to that idea is partial performance for an existing duty. Somebody doesn't finish the work but wants paid for the full amount. All of these are where there can be failure for lack of consideration. Nothing is being offered or nothing new is being offered to an existing contractual relationship. But there's also detrimental reliance. I talked about that at some length in the other video. I'm not going to get back into that. You can take the lesson from that one. That brings us to the last part that I'm going to cover in this video. Essential terms to a contract. You have to have enough of the basics for the parties, time, place, and quantity. Who, when, where, how much. Without these basics, you may not have a contract. If you don't have those details, it may be that you just have an agreement to agree. I'll get back to you later. Now, the more detail that you put into the contract, the better. But if you just have the basics, those other less essential details can be filled in later. You can apply those terms from law or from custom. That gets you the basics that you need for a contract. All right, and that gets you the basic definition of a contract. So That gets us through the first part of contracts. The next video will pick up with written versus oral contracts. I'm trying to keep these videos short so that way you're able to digest the materials and follow along. So we'll pick up there with the next video.